This show is moderately better than either Godzilla anime, although to be fair, that's not really saying much. Basically, it just needs to be above average at that point. Although I don't know if I'd call Rebirth a great show. I'll try and remain spoiler-free for those of you that are still curious about the show. Gamera Rebirth's biggest issue is its pacing. For the first 3 episodes, I was confused as to what the motivations were for anything. It genuinely seemed kind of rudderless, like it was just a Monster of the Week show. But 30 minutes of each episode were dedicated to these kids and their lives, which makes sense on its own. You do want to get to know your main characters. Gamera does have a history with annoying child characters, but this group is fairly endearing and believable. Although, I didn't realize the curly-haired kid was a girl until about halfway through the series. Thankfully, the plot does pick up majorly around the 4th episode, when the actual story gets revealed, and things begin to make sense. But even then, some details seem either out of place or straight-up plot holes. Specifically, I was confused as to one character's motivation, where he seemingly got told the same thing twice, but both times he acted as though it was the first time. Maybe I missed something? But it did seem odd. And because of later plot reveals, I found the show rather anticlimactic. Without detailed spoilers, you are led to believe the main villain is one monster, but it gets soundly defeated without much fight. Then a new monster becomes the big bad for the next episode with no build-up. It's a bittersweet ending rather than an epic one. I think you're probably meant to view each episode separately rather than as a whole series, because while the overarching narrative kind of works, there's little build-up to what comes after the events of each episode. Rather than having cliffhangers, each episode generally has a definitive end, which would be fine for a Monster of the Week style series, with not much in the way of an overarching narrative, but as is, I find the show seems a little confused. It both wants to be a series with a bigger story and purely episodic at the same time. Like, the monsters just kind of show up, one after another, rather than all at once. It makes me think of the old joke of a huge group of ninjas fighting an action hero, but they only ever fight one-on-one. Most fans of this genre tend not to care much about the plot, beyond whether it's confusing or exceptionally boring like the 2 Godzilla animes, which I will confidently say the show is neither. Though it is a bit slow at first, the kids are developed characters and aren't annoying, for the most part. The show definitely does feel like a Gamera show. It's clear the writers and directors were familiar with the source material. A group of kids get roped into this military activity surrounding the monsters, and like the originals, the kids have this massive influence on everything. Despite having a seemingly brighter and more colorful tone than Godzilla films, the series does not shy away from the weird tradition of strangely dark and gruesome moments in the Gamera films. Stabbings, impalements, people and children being eaten by kaiju. The animation style here is strange. Other people have pointed out how the 3D style in anime tends to feel a bit off, with the human characters become stiff and occasionally lifeless, but with the monsters it's actually alright. It makes me kind of wish they just did 2D for the humans and then kept the 3D for the monsters, since I think that would be a fine mix. Speaking of the monsters, they use several of the classic Gamera monsters for this show, which have always been comparatively weird and wacky to their contemporaries in the Godzilla series. My favorite designs from this show are probably Guiron, or however you want to say it, and the Mega Gauss. Strangely, the only Showa Gamera monster we seem to be missing is Barugan. One of the better ones, too. Maybe he'll return in Season 2, if there is one. All in all, I think this show is a mixed bag, but it leans more so towards being good than it does bad, but ultimately, I think it's sadly forgettable. I give it a 6.5 out of 10. I still think the Heisei films are the best Gamera has ever been.